Ji-hoon Kim was drinking his morning coffee when the sky changed forever. He stood at the window of his office at the Korea Space Research Institute, watching the sun rise over Seoul. The coffee was still hot in his hands when the first shadow fell across the city. The shadow was huge. It covered dozens of city blocks. Ji-hoon looked up and saw something that should not exist. A massive ship hung in the air above Seoul. It was dark gray and shaped like a triangle. The ship was silent and still, like a mountain floating in the sky. Ji-hoon dropped his coffee cup. It crashed to the floor, but he did not hear it. His phone started ringing. Then every phone in the building started ringing. Outside, car alarms began to sound. People on the street stopped walking and pointed at the sky. More ships appeared. They came out of nowhere like magic. One appeared over Tokyo, another over New York, more over London, Paris, and Moscow. In minutes, giant alien ships hung over every major city on Earth. Ji-hoon ran to his computer. His hands shook as he typed. The space monitoring system showed nothing. No signals, no warnings, no trace of where these ships came from. They had just appeared. This is impossible, he said to himself. Ships this big cannot just appear. But they had appeared, and they were real. Across the city, Minji Park was having a very different morning. She worked for South Korean military intelligence. Her job was to watch for threats to the country. She had been tracking strange radio signals for 3 days. The signals came from deep space, but they made no sense. When the ships appeared, everything made sense. The signals had been scout reports. The aliens had been watching Earth. Now they were here. Minji grabbed her secure phone and called her commander. "Sir, we have a situation. Multiple unknown aircraft over Seoul. They are not from any Earth nation." "How many?" her commander asked. "One very large craft. Estimated size is 3 kilometers long. It is hovering at 2,000 meters above the city center. Weapons? Unknown. No hostile action yet." The phone went quiet for a moment. "Get to the command center now. This is no longer a normal day." Minji was already running. In Busan, Dong-soo Lee was starting his shift at the shipyard factory. He built parts for cargo ships. It was hard work, but honest work. He was proud of what he built. When the factory whistle blew, he looked up from his welding station. His foreman was running across the factory floor. The man's face was white with fear. "Everyone stop working," the foreman shouted. "Turn on the radios, turn on the TVs." Dong-soo pulled off his welding mask. Other workers gathered around the small TV in the break room. The news showed the same thing on every channel. Giant ships floating over cities around the world. The news reporters could barely speak. They had no words for what they were seeing. "What do they want?" asked Young-ho, who worked the station next to Dong-soo. "I don't know," Dong-soo said. "But I don't think they came here to be friends." The workers watched the news in silence. Some prayed. Some called their families. Dong-soo just watched and thought. If these aliens wanted to hurt people, his welding tools might not be enough to stop them. But he would try. At Seoul National University, So-young Choi was teaching a class about human biology. She was explaining how the human body could adapt to stress when her phone buzzed with an emergency. Alert! Every phone in the classroom buzzed at the same time. The alert was simple. "Unknown aircraft over major cities worldwide. Stay indoors. Await further instructions." So-young looked at her students. They were scared. She could see it in their eyes. "Class is dismissed," she said. "Go home to your families. Be safe." As the students left, So-young stayed behind. She looked out the window and saw the ship hanging over Seoul. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The metal surface seemed to shift and change in the light. She thought about the human body, how it responded to threats, how it could do amazing things when pushed to the limit. She wondered if humanity would need to push itself to the limit soon. 12 hours after the ships appeared, they finally spoke. Ji-hoon was still at his office, working with teams around the world to understand the ships. The aliens used powerful transmitters to send their message to every radio, TV, and computer on Earth. The voice was wrong. It sounded like a machine trying to speak human words, but failing. The grammar was broken. The pronunciation was terrible, but the meaning was clear. People of Earth, we are the Kethran Empire. Your world is now part of our territory. You will give us your strongest people. They will serve in our empire. If you do this, we will not destroy your cities. You have 1 day to begin bringing us workers. Bring them to the ships. Do not resist. Resistance will bring punishment. The message repeated in different languages. Each version sounded just as wrong and broken. When the message ended, the world was silent for a moment. Then the chaos began. Ji-hoon listened to radio reports from around the world. Some countries were preparing to fight. Others were trying to negotiate. A few were actually considering giving the aliens what they wanted. They want slaves, he said to his colleague, Dr. Huang. They came here to take our people. But why? Dr. Huang asked. They have technology we cannot imagine. Why? Do they need human workers? Ji-hoon looked at the data on his screen. The ships used incredible amounts of energy just to stay in the air. Their technology was advanced, but it seemed wasteful, inefficient. Maybe they are not as smart as they think, he said. Minji was in the military command center when the alien message played. The room full of officers and analysts listened in complete silence. When it ended, everyone started talking at once. We cannot give them our people, said General Kang. We cannot fight ships that big, said Colonel Shin. We need more information, said Major Bay. Minji studied the translation of the alien message. Something was wrong with it. The aliens spoke like they had learned human languages from old books, but had never actually talked to humans. Sir, she said to General Kang, I think they do not understand us very well. What do you mean? Their message assumes we will obey, out of fear, but they also seem afraid to land. Why stay in the sky if they are so powerful? General Kang thought about this. You think they are not as confident as they pretend? I think they have never met anyone like us before. In Busan, Dong-su gathered with his fellow workers. They met in secret after the factory closed. The government had told everyone to stay calm and wait for instructions. But Dong-su did not want to wait. They want to take our people, he told the group. They want to make us slaves. What can we do? Asked Young-ho. They have spaceships. They have spaceships, Dong-su agreed. But they also need something from us. That means they are not as strong as they want us to think. He looked around at his friends. These were good people. Strong people. People who knew how to build things and fix things and work together. If they want a fight, Dong-su said, we will give them one they will never forget. The first day ended with no one brought to the ships. The aliens sent another message, angrier this time. But still, no one came. Humanity had been given a choice, surrender or resist. They chose to resist. The Kethran ships waited for 3 days. On the 4th day, they stopped waiting. Small ships dropped from the larger ones like deadly raindrops. They landed in cities around the world. The ships were black and smooth with no windows. When they opened, creatures came out that looked almost human, but wrong. The Kethrans were tall and thin. Their skin was pale gray. They had 4 arms instead of 2, and their eyes were too large. They wore dark armor that hummed with electricity. They carried weapons that glowed blue. But what surprised humans most was how the aliens moved. They were slow and careful. They seemed afraid. In Seoul, a Kethran squad landed in a shopping district. People ran screaming, but some stayed to watch. The aliens moved in perfect formation, like robots following a program. They pointed their weapons at buildings, but they did not fire. Jihoon watched the landing from his office through security cameras placed around the city. He noticed something strange. The aliens always stayed together. They never split up. When humans threw rocks at them, they did not chase the rock throwers. They just stood there and waited. "They are following rules," he told Dr. Huang. "But the rules do not work for fighting humans." The aliens had clearly practiced this invasion many times, but they had practiced it on different kinds of people. People who would run away and hide. People who would surrender quickly. Humans did not follow the alien script. In Busan, Dongsu watched a Kethran squad try to enter his factory. The aliens expected to find scared workers hiding inside. Instead, they found empty rooms full of traps. Dongsu and his friends had spent 3 days preparing. They had moved all the valuable equipment to hidden rooms. They had rigged the main factory floor with surprises. When the Kethrans walked into the factory, lights started flashing. Alarms started blaring. Welding torches turned on by themselves, spraying sparks everywhere. The aliens spun around, trying to find enemies to shoot, but there was no one there. "Humans," one alien said in broken Korean. "Come out. We will not hurt you if you come now." From his hiding spot in the ceiling, Dongsu almost laughed. The alien sounded like a child reading from a script. The aliens spent 2 hours searching the factory. They found nothing. When they left, they looked confused and angry. Dongsu smiled. Round 1 goes to the humans. At Seoul National University, So-young had turned her medical lab into a treatment center for people hurt in the alien raids. She was bandaging a man's arm when something interesting happened. An injured Kethran was brought in by South Korean soldiers. The alien had been hurt when a building collapsed during a raid. The soldiers wanted So-young to treat the alien so they could question it. So-young had never seen an alien up close. She was surprised by how human-like it looked. The skin was different. And there were extra arms, but the basic body was very similar. She could see blood vessels under the pale skin. The alien was breathing hard, just like a scared human would. But there was something else. The alien had metal devices attached to its head and neck. The devices blinked with small lights. They looked like computer parts. "What are these?" she asked the alien in English. The alien looked at her with its big eyes. For a moment, it seemed confused. Then its face went blank, like someone had turned off a switch. "I am Kethran warrior," it said in mechanical voice. "I do not speak to slaves." But So-young had seen the moment of confusion. Before the metal devices took control, the alien had looked at her like a person, like someone who was lost and scared. She began to wonder if the Kethrans were really in control of themselves. Minji was having problems of her own. The aliens had taken several dozen humans from around the world. They were supposed to be slaves, but the aliens did not seem to know what to do with them. Korean intelligence had contacts everywhere. Through secret communications, Minji learned what was happening to the captured humans. The news was not what anyone expected. The humans were refusing to work. They were asking questions. They were demanding to speak to lawyers and calling for their governments to rescue them. Some had organized hunger strikes. Others had started teaching the alien guards about human rights. Most surprisingly, the humans were talking to other prisoners. The Kethran Empire had slaves from many different worlds. These alien slaves had been quiet and obedient for years. But after talking to the humans, they were starting to cause problems too. "The captured humans are not acting like slaves," Minji reported to General Kong. "They are acting like humans." "What does that mean?" "It means the aliens have never dealt with anyone like us before." Minji had studied the alien communication patterns. The Kethrans expected their threats to work immediately. When humans did not surrender, the aliens seemed lost. They kept sending the same threatening messages over and over, as if saying it more times would make it more scary. But humans were getting used to the threats. Some people had started making jokes about the aliens on social media. Others were creating funny videos. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with anger and defiance. The aliens did not understand human humor. They definitely did not understand human stubbornness. In space, aboard the main Catherine ship, Fleet Commander Vexatar was having the worst week of his very long life. Vexatar had conquered 47 worlds for the Catherine Empire. Every species had followed the same pattern. First came fear, then surrender, then acceptance. The process usually took less than 10 days. Earth was different. "Report," he commanded his subordinate, Captain Mordek. "The humans continued to resist, Commander. Our ground forces report that humans are unpredictable." "Explain." "They do not run when shot at. They do not surrender when outnumbered. They use their primitive tools as weapons. They hide in places our scanners cannot detect. They work together without central command. They even help humans they do not know." Vextar's 4 arms moved in irritation. "This does not match the behavioral profiles." "No, Commander. The humans appear to be defective." But that was not the worst news. The worst news came from the slave processing centers on other worlds. "The human prisoners are corrupting our other slaves," Captain Mordek continued. "They speak of something called freedom and dignity. Our translators cannot properly explain these concepts, but they seem to be spreading." Vextar had been a Catherine warrior for 300 years. He had never heard of slaves teaching each other to rebel. It was impossible. The slave conditioning prevented such thoughts. "Increase the conditioning on the human prisoners," he ordered. "We have tried, Commander. The conditioning does not work on them. Their brains seem to reject it." This was very bad news. The Catherine Empire was built on slave labor. If slaves started believing they could be free, the entire empire would collapse. "What do the humans want?" Vextar asked. "They want us to leave their planet and free all our slaves." Vextar's large eyes blinked slowly. "In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever made demands. They begged for mercy, but they never made demands. Do they understand that we can destroy their world? They say they understand. They say they do not care. They will fight us anyway." Back on Earth, Jehoon made a discovery that changed everything. He had been studying the energy patterns from the alien ships. The patterns were complex, but they followed rules. After days of analysis, he found something important. The ships were powerful, but they were also fragile. They used enormous amounts of energy just to stay in the air. If that energy was disrupted, even for a few seconds, the ships would crash. More importantly, the aliens seemed to have no backup plans. They had one way of doing things, and if that way failed, they did not know what to do next. "They are not explorers," he told Dr. Huang. "They are not scientists. They are bureaucrats with big weapons." What does that mean for us? It means they have never had to think for themselves. They follow orders and procedures, but humans do not fit their procedures. Jehoon sent his findings to governments around the world. The information spread quickly through secret networks. Humanity began to realize something important. The aliens were not gods. They were not unstoppable. They were just bullies with advanced technology. And bullies could be beaten. Dongsu had already figured this out on his own. His workers had been watching the aliens for days. They had noticed that the Catherines always did the same things in the same order. They were predictable. Tomorrow, he told his team, "We are going to teach these aliens that humans do not make good slaves." "How?" asked Young Ho. Dongsu smiled. "We are going to give them exactly what they asked for. We are going to bring them workers." But the workers would be carrying more than just their hands. 3 months had passed since the Catherines arrived on Earth. It was not going as planned. Fleet Commander Vexatar stood in his command center, staring at reports that made no sense. His empire was falling apart, and it was all because of one small blue planet. "Commander," Captain Mordek said, his voice shaking, We have received 17 emergency transmissions from different sectors of the Empire. What is the nature of these emergencies? Slave rebellions, sir. On Kepler 442b, the Grexian workers have stopped mining operations. On Proxima Centauri C, the Zelthon builders are refusing to construct new facilities. On Wolf 359b, the mollusk farmers have destroyed their own crops. Vextar's forearms trembled with anger. This is impossible. These species have been slaves for centuries. They have no concept of rebellion. Sir, intelligence reports suggest they have been in contact with the human prisoners we captured. Somehow the humans are teaching them to resist. In the 3 months since the invasion began, the Kethrans had managed to capture only 847 humans. These humans should have been processed into the slave system like millions of other creatures before them. Instead, they had become the most disruptive force in the Empire's history. The humans refused to work without payment. They demanded lawyers. They organized protests. They taught other slaves about something called labor unions. Worst of all, they kept talking about rights and freedom in ways that the Kethran translation computers could not properly block. On Earth, Jihoon had made breakthrough after breakthrough. Working with scientists around the world, he had mapped the alien technology completely. The Kethrans were not as advanced as they pretended to be. Their ships are powered by controlled micro-wormholes, he explained to an international team of researchers over encrypted video conference. The technology is impressive, but it is also unstable. If we can generate the right electromagnetic frequency, we can collapse their power systems. Dr. Chen from Beijing nodded. We have been testing similar theories. The aliens seem to have no experience with guerrilla warfare or asymmetric tactics, Dr. Okafor from Lagos agreed. They expect large-scale resistance that they can see and target. They do not know how to fight an enemy that hides in small groups. Jihoon smiled. Then let us give them a lesson in human creativity. The plan they developed was elegant and simple. Humans around the world would build small electromagnetic pulse devices using common electronics. When activated simultaneously, these devices would overload the alien ship's power systems for just a few seconds. That would be enough to bring the ships down. But first, they needed to test the theory. In Busan, Dongsu had become the leader of a resistance cell with over 200 workers. They had been harassing the aliens for months with hit-and-run tactics. The Kethrans had learned to avoid the industrial district entirely. Dongsu received Jihoon's technical specifications through a secret network that connected resistance groups worldwide. The device was simple enough to build with factory equipment. Will it work? Asked Young Ho, looking at the strange collection of wires and circuits they had assembled. Only one way to find out, Dongsu said. They waited until a small Kethran patrol ship passed over the factory. Dongsu activated the device. For exactly 3 seconds, every light on the alien ship went out. The ship dropped 20 meters before its power came back on. The aliens inside were clearly panicking. The ship flew away quickly, wobbling like a drunk person trying to walk. It works, Dongsu said, grinning. Now we build bigger ones. So-Yung had made her own discovery. She had been treating more injured aliens over the past months. Each time, she learned something new about their biology. The Kethrans were not a naturally aggressive species. The metal devices attached to their heads and necks were not just computers. They were control systems that suppressed natural emotions and independent thinking. She had managed to secretly examine the devices on several unconscious patients. The technology was sophisticated, but it had a weakness. It was designed to control species that had naturally submissive personalities. It was not built to handle the kind of complex, chaotic thinking that humans did naturally. More importantly, she had discovered that the control systems could be damaged by exposure to certain human behaviors. Things like humor, creativity, and stubbornness seemed to create feedback loops that overloaded the alien implants. They are not evil, she told her research team. They are prisoners in their own bodies. She began developing a treatment that could safely disable the control devices. If it worked, the Kethrans could think for themselves again. That might change everything. Minji had been coordinating resistance activities across South Korea. What had started as military intelligence work had become something much larger. She was now part of a global network that connected freedom fighters on dozens of worlds. The most surprising development was that other alien species had begun contacting Earth directly. They were using secret communication channels to bypass Kethran monitoring. The messages were always the same. How do we become free like humans? One message particularly moved her. It came from a Grexian slave on a mining world. We have been slaves for 400 years. Our children are born slaves. Our children's children will be slaves. But the humans say this is wrong. They say we can choose our own path. Is this true? Can slaves become free? Minji wrote back carefully, "Freedom is not something you are given. It is something you take. You are already free. You just need to act like it." Within days, the Grexian miners had stopped working. When the Kethran overseers threatened them, they did something unprecedented. They laughed. The revolution was spreading faster than anyone had imagined. On the main Kethran command ship, Vextar was losing control of his own crew. The human prisoners had somehow infected his warriors with dangerous ideas. It had started small. A few warriors began asking questions about orders instead of simply following them. Others started expressing something the ship's computers identified as individual preferences. Then came the real crisis. A group of Kethran soldiers had disabled their control implants and demanded to speak with Vextar directly. "Commander," said the lead rebel, a warrior named Kextal, "we wish to understand why we fight." Vextar stared at him in shock. In his 300 years of service, no Kethran had ever asked such a question. "You fight because the Empire commands it." But why does the Empire command it? What purpose does conquest serve? This was exactly the kind of thinking that the control implants were designed to prevent. Vextar realized that his own crew was being corrupted by exposure to human prisoners. "Increase security around the human containment areas," he ordered Captain Mordek. "No more contact between humans and Kethran personnel." "Sir, that may be difficult. The humans seem to communicate their ideas even without direct contact. Our soldiers report strange dreams and thoughts after being near the human prisoners." Vextar felt something he had never experienced before: fear. The humans were not just resisting conquest. They were destroying the very foundation of Kethran society. They were teaching his own people to think for themselves. Back on Earth, the final phase of the human resistance was beginning. Ji-hoon had coordinated the construction of over 10,000 electromagnetic pulse devices around the world. Each device was small and portable, built from common electronics that would not attract alien attention. Dongsu had trained resistance fighters in every major city. They knew exactly when and where to strike. So-young had developed a treatment that could free Kethrans from their control implants. She had even tested it successfully on several alien prisoners. Minji had established communication with rebel groups on 43 different worlds. They were all waiting for the signal to begin coordinated uprisings. The signal would come when the Kethran ships fell from Earth's sky. "Tomorrow," Ji-hoon announced to the Global Resistance Network, "we show these aliens what happens when you threaten human freedom." But the aliens were not waiting for tomorrow. They had decided that Earth was too dangerous to leave unconquered. If they could not enslave humanity, they would destroy it. Vextar gave the order he had hoped never to give. "Prepare the planet killers. We will reduce Earth to molten rock." The fate of 2 species and dozens of others across the galaxy would be decided in the next 24 hours. Humanity had one chance to prove that freedom was stronger than fear, that creativity was more powerful than control, and that sometimes the smallest species could change the entire galaxy. The revolution was about to begin. The planet-killer weapons were charging. Deep inside the Kethrin command ship, massive energy collectors were gathering power from the ship's micro-wormhole generators. In 6 hours, they would have enough energy to crack Earth's crust and boil its oceans. Fleet Commander Vexitar watched the charging process with satisfaction. He had conquered 47 worlds without destroying any of them. Destroyed planets made no profits. But Earth was different. Earth was dangerous. Better to destroy it than let it corrupt the rest of the galaxy. "Sir," Captain Mordek reported, "we are detecting increased electromagnetic activity on the planet's surface." "Human communications? Unknown. The signals are too weak and scattered to identify." Vexitar nodded. It did not matter what the humans were planning. In 6 hours, their planning would end permanently. He was wrong. On Earth, Jehoon stood in his laboratory, surrounded by equipment that 3 months ago he could never have imagined building. Human scientists around the world had reverse-engineered Kethrin technology and improved it. The electromagnetic pulse devices were ready, but they had built something else too, something the aliens would never expect. "Are the quantum communicators working?" he asked Dr. Huang. "All 43 rebel worlds are connected. They are waiting for our signal." The quantum communicators were humanity's greatest achievement. Using principles stolen from Kethrin technology, they could send messages instantly across the galaxy. The Kethrins had never thought to share this technology with their slaves. They had never imagined that slaves might want to talk to each other. Jehoon looked at his watch. "In 1 hour, we changed the galaxy forever." In Busan, Dongsu was leading the largest resistance operation in human history. Workers, students, soldiers, and ordinary citizens had joined together. They carried electromagnetic pulse devices, homemade weapons, and most importantly, they carried hope. "Remember," Dongsu told his team, "we are not just fighting for Earth. We are fighting for every slave in the galaxy. Today we show them all that freedom is possible." Young-ho raised his hand. "What if we fail?" Dongsu smiled. "Then we fail fighting. That is more than any slave has done in 1,000 years. The resistance. Fighters moved through the city like shadows. Each team had specific targets. When the signal came, they would strike simultaneously at every Kethrin position on Earth. At Seoul National University, So-young was preparing for the most important medical procedure of her life. She had 12 captured Kethrin soldiers in her makeshift medical facility. With their permission, she was going to remove their control implants. The Kethrins had volunteered for the procedure after learning what the implants really did. For the first time in their lives, they wanted to think their own thoughts. "Will it hurt?" asked one Kethrin soldier named Veklon. "I do not know," So-young answered honestly. "No one has ever done this before. But it cannot hurt more than being a slave to machines." The procedure was delicate. The implants were connected to the brain and nervous system. One mistake could kill the patient. But So-young had practiced on simulations for weeks. She was as ready as anyone could be as she began. The first surgery, So-young thought about what they were really doing. They were not just freeing individuals. They were proving that the Kethrin Empire's control could be broken. They were showing that every slave in the galaxy could be free. Minji sat in the military command center, coordinating the global resistance. Screens around her showed readiness reports from every continent. Humanity was united in a way it had never been before. "All teams report ready," she announced. "Electromagnetic pulse devices are in position. Resistance fighters are standing. Bi-alien positions are confirmed." General Kang looked at the tactical display. "How many humans are participating in this operation?" "Approximately 2 million active fighters, sir. But intelligence suggests that nearly every human on Earth is contributing in some way." It was true. The resistance had become a truly global effort. Children built simple devices in schools. Elderly people served as lookouts and messengers. Even people who could not fight provided food, shelter, and supplies to those who could. For the first time in human history, the entire species was working toward a single goal. In space, the revolution had already begun. The quantum communicators were sending more than just coordination signals. They were broadcasting something much more dangerous: human ideas. On Kepler 442b, Grexian miners received detailed instructions for building electromagnetic weapons. On Proxima Centauri C, Zelton, builders learned how to sabotage Kethran facilities. On Wolf 359b, mollusk farmers discovered they could use their agricultural chemicals to make explosives. But most importantly, slaves across the galaxy were learning that they were not alone. They were part of something bigger. They were part of a revolution that could free everyone. Kethran commanders throughout the Empire began reporting the same thing. Their slaves were no longer afraid. Fear had been replaced by something much more dangerous: hope. On the command ship above Earth, Vextar was beginning to understand the true scope of the disaster. "Sir," Captain Mordek reported, his voice shaking, "we are receiving reports of coordinated uprisings on 26 worlds. The slaves are using weapons they built themselves. They are following battle plans that appear to be of human origin." How is this possible? The humans must have found a way to communicate across the galaxy. They are teaching our slaves to rebel. Vextar felt the ship shake slightly. He looked at the status displays. Several of his own crew members had disabled their control implants. They were no longer following orders. "Sir," said Kextal, the Kethran rebel leader, "we demand that you stop the planet killer weapons. I am your commander. You will obey." "No," Kextal said simply. "We will not." This was chaos. This was madness. In 300 years of service, Vextar had never imagined that his own crew would refuse orders. "Security teams to the bridge," he commanded. But half the security teams had also removed their implants. The other half were confused and frightened. They had never dealt with rebellion from their own people. On Earth, the moment had arrived. Jehoon sent the signal that would change everything. Across the planet, 2 million humans activated their electromagnetic pulse devices simultaneously. The effect was immediate and devastating. Every Kethran ship on Earth lost power at the same moment. The massive command ship lurched in the sky as its generators struggled to restart. Smaller ships crashed into buildings or fell into the ocean. But the electromagnetic pulse did more than disable ships. It also disrupted the control implants of every Kethran on Earth. For the first time in their lives, thousands of Kethran soldiers could think clearly. They looked around and asked themselves, "Why are we here? Why are we fighting people who only want to be free?" Many of them simply put down their weapons and walked away. Dongsu led his fighters through the streets of Busan, liberating Kethran prisoners and freeing human slaves. But instead of fighting angry aliens, they found confused beings who seemed lost and frightened. "We do not want to fight you," one Kethran soldier told Dongsu in broken Korean. "We never wanted to fight you. The machines in our heads made us fight." Dongsu looked at the alien's pale, scared face. "Then do not fight. Help us instead." In her medical facility, Soyoung successfully removed the first control implant. The Kethran patient opened his eyes and began to cry. They were tears of joy. "I can think," he whispered. "I can feel. I remember who I was before the machines." Soyoung smiled. "Who were you?" "I was a teacher. I taught young Kethrans about art and music, before the Empire took me and put machines in my head. Across the galaxy, the revolution exploded into full bloom. The quantum communicators carried news of Earth's victory to every slave world. Within hours, the Kethran Empire was facing simultaneous uprisings on over 100 planets. The slaves had learned the most important lesson humanity could teach. They were not alone, they were not powerless, and they deserved to be free. In Iabirni, the command ship above Earth, Vextar faced a choice he had never imagined. His crew was in open rebellion. His empire was collapsing. His planet-killer weapons were ready to fire, but there was no one left to operate them. Kextal approached him calmly. "Commander, the humans wish to speak with you." "Speak with me." "They are offering to negotiate. They say they do not want to destroy us. They want to help us." Vextar laughed bitterly. "Help us? They have destroyed everything we built." "Have they?" Kextal asked. "Or have they freed us from something that was destroying us?" For the first time in 300 years, Vextar thought about his life before the control implants. He had been an explorer once. He had loved discovering new worlds and new forms of life. When had that curiosity become conquest? When had wonder become oppression? The answer was obvious. It had happened when the machines were put in his head. "What do the humans want?" he asked quietly. "They want to talk. They say all thinking beings deserve the right to choose their own path." Vexitar looked around his bridge. His crew was watching, him expectantly. For the first time in centuries, they were waiting for him to make a choice instead of simply following programming. "Very well," he said. "We will talk." 6 months after the Kethran ships first appeared over Earth, Fleet Commander Vexitar stood in a place he had never expected to be, the United Nations building in New York. The building was damaged from the invasion, but it had been quickly repaired. Humans were good at fixing things, Vextar had learned. They were also good at forgiving, which surprised him more than anything else. Across the table sat the human negotiation team. Jahoon Kim represented the scientists. Minji Park spoke for the military forces. Dongsu Lee was there for the workers and resistance fighters. So Young Choi represented the medical teams that had been freeing Kethrans from their control implants. "The terms are simple," Jahoon said. "Complete freedom for all slaves in your former empire. No more control implants. No more forced labor. Every species gets to choose its own path." Vextar nodded slowly. It was a reasonable demand, but it meant the end of everything his people had built for 1,000 years. "Our empire will collapse," he said. "We do not know how to survive without slave labor." Dongsu leaned forward. "Then learn. We will teach you." "Why would you help us?" "We came here to enslave you," So Jung answered. "Because slavery is wrong, no matter who does it. If we let you continue to be slaves to your own machines, we are no better than you were." Over the past months, So Jung had removed control implants from over 3,000 Kethrans. Each surgery revealed the same thing. Underneath the mechanical control, the Kethrans were not monsters. They were people who had been forced to do terrible things. "The choice is yours," Minji said. "You can try to continue the empire and face revolution on every world you control. Or you can join us in building something better." Vexitar thought about the reports he had received. The empire was finished. Over 200 worlds had declared independence. Slave populations that had been obedient for centuries were building their own governments. The humans had shared their knowledge freely, teaching everyone how to build weapons, communicate across space, and organize resistance movements. But they had also shared something else. The idea that cooperation was better than conquest. "What would this new arrangement look like?" Vextar asked. Jihoon smiled. "We call it the Galactic Federation. Every species gets one vote. Every world gets to make its own laws. No one rules over anyone else. And if we refuse, then you refuse," Dongsu said simply. "That is your choice to make, but you will make it alone." Vexitar looked around the room. These humans had defeated the greatest empire in the galaxy without building a single warship. They had done it with ideas. with the simple belief that freedom was worth fighting for. More importantly, they had proven that different species could work together as equals. The resistance movement had included humans, freed Kethrans, Grexians, Zelthans, mollusks, and dozens of other species. They had all contributed their unique skills to the fight for freedom. "I accept your terms," Vextar said. "But I have a question. Why do you trust us? How do you know we will not simply build new control implants and start the Empire again?" So-young answered. "Because you have tasted freedom now. You know what it feels like to think your own thoughts and make your own choices. No one who has been free ever wants to be a slave again." She was right. Vextar had not realized how much the control implants had stolen from him until they were gone. He could feel emotions again. He could question orders. He could imagine a future different from the past. For the first time in 3 centuries, he felt hope. The signing ceremony was held on Earth, but it was broadcast to every world in the galaxy. Representatives from 847 different species attended, either in person or through quantum communication links. Jehoon watched as each representative signed the Galactic Freedom Charter. The document was simple, written in language that could be understood by any thinking being. All sentient life has the right to freedom. No being may own another. No government may rule without the consent of the governed. All species are equal. All worlds are sovereign. It was based on human political philosophy, but it had been improved by contributions from hundreds of different cultures. The Grexians had added protections for worker rights. The Zelthans had included environmental protections. The mollusks had insisted on provisions for peaceful conflict resolution. "This is the most important document in galactic history," Dr. Huang whispered to Jehoon. "No," Jehoon said. "This is just the beginning." Dongsu stood on the factory floor in Busan, but it was no longer just a human factory. Kethran engineers worked alongside Korean welders. Grexian miners shared lunch with human technicians. Zelthan architects collaborated with Earth's best designers. They were building something new, ships designed for exploration instead of conquest, medical equipment to heal instead of control, communication systems to connect instead of spy. "How does it feel to build something instead of destroying it?" Young-ho asked a former Kethran warrior named Texval. Texval looked at the half-finished exploration ship they were constructing. "It feels like I am alive for the first time in my life." The former slaves were adapting to freedom in different ways. Some struggled with the concept of making their own choices. Others embraced it so completely that they could barely sit still. But all of them were learning. Most importantly, they were teaching their children. For the first time in 1,000 years, young Kethrans, Grexians, and Zelthans were growing up without control implants. They were learning to think for themselves from birth. Minji had become Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Federation. Her job was to help coordinate the transition from empire to democracy across hundreds of worlds. It was not easy. Some species had been slaves for so long that they had forgotten how to govern themselves. Others had never developed concepts like voting or individual rights. But they were learning. Humans traveled throughout the galaxy as teachers and advisors. They shared everything they knew about democracy, human rights, and peaceful conflict resolution. "The most important thing we can teach them," Minji told her staff, "is that freedom is not something you achieve once and then forget about. It is something you must protect every day." She had seen how quickly freedom could be lost if people stopped paying attention. The Kethrans had once been free, before they allowed machines to do their thinking for them. So-young had established medical centers on 30 different worlds. Her mission was to help former slaves recover from centuries of physical and psychological conditioning. But her most important work was still on Earth. She was training a new generation of doctors in what she called liberation medicine, the science of freeing beings from artificial control. "Every species is different," she taught her students, "but the desire for freedom is universal. Our job is to heal not just bodies but souls." She had learned that the control implants were just one form of slavery. Some species had been controlled through drugs, others through genetic modification. A few had been enslaved through pure psychological conditioning, but all of them could be freed. It just required patience, skill, and most importantly, the belief that everyone deserved to be free. Vextar had become something he never expected: a student. He spent his days learning about democratic government, individual rights, and peaceful cooperation. It was harder than conquering worlds had been. Democracy required thinking and compromise and listening to others, but it was also more satisfying. When he helped solve a problem through negotiation instead of force, when he saw former enemies working together, when he watched young Kethrans laugh and play without fear, these moments were worth more than all his military victories. "Do you ever miss the Empire?" asked Kextal, who had become his closest advisor. "I miss the certainty," Vextar admitted. "It was easier when someone else made all the decisions." "But was it better?" Vextar thought about the question. No, it was not better. It was just easier. They were standing on the observation deck of a new space station that orbited Earth. The station was built by workers from dozens of different worlds, all cooperating as equals. Through the windows, they could see ships coming and going, not warships, but exploration vessels, trade ships, and passenger transports, carrying beings who were free to travel wherever they chose. "The humans have given us something precious," Vextar said. "They have given us the chance to choose who we want to be." The transformation of the galaxy was not complete. It would take generations to undo 1,000 years of oppression. Some species still struggled with freedom. Some individuals still longed for the certainty of slavery. But progress was being made every day. On remote worlds, former slaves were building their own cities. Children who had never known freedom were growing up as citizens instead of property. Scientists who had been forced to build weapons of oppression were now creating tools of exploration and healing. And throughout the galaxy, beings who had never imagined they could be free were learning the most important lesson humanity had to teach. Freedom is not a gift that others give you. It is a right that you must claim for yourself. 5 years after the Kethran ships first appeared over Earth, Jehun stood in the same spot where he had first seen the alien vessels. But now, the sky was filled with ships from hundreds of different worlds. They came in peace as friends and partners. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Dr. Huang asked.